No voter on this continent went to the ballot box to open the floodgates to millions of unvetted immigrants. But you know what they did vote for? In England, they voted for Brexit, and agree or disagree, they voted for it. And more all over Europe, they're voting for political leaders who promise to put an end to out-of-control migration. Now, I happen to agree with a lot of these concerns, but you don't have to agree with me. I just think that people care about their homes, they care about their dreams, they care about their safety and their capacity to provide for themselves and their children. And they're smart. I think this is one of the most important things I've learned in my brief time in politics. Contrary to what you might hear a couple mountains over in Davos, the citizens of all of our nations don't generally think of themselves as educated animals or as interchangeable cogs of a global economy. And it's hardly surprising that they don't want to be shuffled about or relentlessly ignored by their leaders. And it is the business of democracy to adjudicate these big questions at the ballot box. I believe that dismissing people, dismissing their concerns, or worse yet, shutting down media, shutting down elections, or shutting people out of the political process protects nothing. In fact, it is the most surefire way to destroy democracy. And speaking up and expressing opinions isn't election interference. Even when people express views outside your own country, and even when those people are very influential. And trust me, I say this with all humor, if American democracy can survive 10 years of Greta Thunberg scolding, you guys can survive a few months of Elon Musk. But what no democracy, American, German, or European, will survive is telling millions of voters that their thoughts and concerns, their aspirations, their pleas for relief are invalid or unworthy of even being considered. Democracy rests on the sacred principle that the voice of the people matters. There's no room for firewalls. You either uphold the principle or you don't. Europeans, the people, have a voice. European leaders have a choice. And my strong belief is that we do not need to be afraid of the future. You can embrace what your people tell you, even when it's surprising, even when you don't agree. And if you do so, you can face the future with certainty and with confidence, knowing that the nation stands behind each of you. And that, to me, is the great magic of democracy. It's not in these stone buildings or beautiful hotels. It's not even in the great institutions that we have built together as a shared society. To believe in democracy is to understand that each of our citizens has wisdom and has a voice. And if we refuse to listen to that voice, even our most successful fights will secure very little. As Pope John Paul II, in my view, one of the most extraordinary champions of democracy on this continent or any other, once said, "Do not be afraid." We shouldn't be afraid of our people, even when they express views that disagree with their leadership. Thank you all. Good luck to all of you. God bless you.
And that was J.D. Vance, the U.S. Vice President, addressing the Munich Security Conference. The Vice President there railing against numerous legal decisions made within the European Union, particularly surrounding issues of free speech, suggesting that the biggest threat to Europe is not from without, but it is from within. He was suggesting that migration is out of control, and that there may be systematic ignorance.
Europeans sneered about that in the first term. They opposed it in the run-up to the last election. They wanted Harris to win. Donald Trump came in triumphant, and now this is a certain amount of political payback for that. That election because of allegations that the ostensible winner of the election had benefited from disinformation, misinformation campaigns that it was suspected to be sourced from Russia. And yes, an American vice president wading into that, of course, is an intervention in the sovereign decision of those courts within Romania. But I think probably the motivation behind that is this sense, what I just mentioned, this sort of sense of payback that Europeans felt free to comment and sneer about Trump policies for so long, and the whole MAGA movement, and this is now Europe getting a taste of its own medicine.
Also, on the issue of migration, Richard, the vice president began his speech by referencing the attack that took place in Munich yesterday when over 30 people were injured in a car ramming by an Afghan person who has been living in Germany. And the police in Munich, of course, they've already said that this seems to be a case of Islamic extremism. And then Vance went on to talk about mass migration being the biggest problem facing Europe. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so, I mean, I was at the scene of that attack yesterday, Terry, just a couple of hours after it took place. And certainly this has shaken the city of Munich. And it's been yet another of these incidents that's taken place in recent months, which is definitely having a significant impact on the election campaign here in Germany. This has been a really live issue, highly controversial, about what kind of steps that need to be taken to try to prevent these sorts of attacks, further clampdowns on migration, stricter policies towards people whose asylum applications have been rejected and who need to be deported. That debate is going on anyway between the political parties fighting for that election. But for J.D. Vance, of course, to bring this up as such a central theme in his speech does look very much like an intervention within German politics, and implicitly, potentially, an intervention in favor of the far-right populist party, the Alternative for Germany, which, of course, Elon Musk, who J.D. Vance also mentioned in his speech, has vocally supported. Now, J.D. Vance has not gone so far as vocally supporting the AfD or explicitly doing that. That would, I think, be seen as crossing a very dark red line. But between the lines, there's an implication of that. I think what's going to be really interesting is to see how the conservatives, the mainstream conservatives here in Germany, respond to that. So Friedrich Merz, who is here this weekend, he's the man who's likely to be the next chancellor. He's the leader who's likely to have to deal with the Trump administration in the future. He has been pushing for a tougher line on migration. He's been making that a major plank of his campaign in recent weeks. But at the same time, he's been insisting that he would never work with the AfD, the Alternative for Germany party, saying that the so-called firewall, which kind of stands between the older established parties and the AfD, that will remain intact. But we heard J.D. Vance explicitly saying in his speech there, essentially that firewalls are illegitimate, that they're anti-democratic, that it is wrong to discount the views of the now 20% of Germans who support that party. So a real dilemma, really, for Friedrich Merz and the Conservatives, how to deal with that messaging coming from the Trump administration.
And while we're still waiting for the foreign minister of China to address the conference there, Richard, I just want to